Aloha, Kako. Kelly, nice to have you on board.
Aloha.
First of all, the same thing that we say to everyone who comes on, we understand to allow this democratic process to work, that citizens have to step forward and be part of the process. In one way or another, for most people that aren't career politicians, there's a sacrifice to that. And we want to say how much we do appreciate. We know that you stepped out of a business system. If it was just about pay, you would definitely be somewhere else. So we do thank you for being here from that side. I do have a question for you. In this nexus that we're in right now, of the pandemic, of 30% unemployment, of the loss of revenue from hotels and other things, the sheer stark understanding of our time. In about a minute or so, could you say what it is that you feel that you will bring to the council, that not only this year, but in your next election cycle, that you can truly be of service to the council and to the county?
Well, my first order of business is to help with the outreach and education on the county manager proposal, the ballot initiative that's going, that'll be on the ballot along with me in November. And this is going to make a huge change in our governance. So this is sort of a basic change that we can make. It's going to affect almost everything else that's done at the county level, or at the administration, and even with the county council, because the county council will be dealing with a little less politics and a little more managerial logistics, I'm hoping. The other thing is, this coming out of this pandemic is going to be a slow burn, and we're going to have a strong economic plan. We don't have one right now. We don't even have one. They set up a task force at the state level, and that went into immediately, oh, we got to hire consultants because, we don't have the collective knowledge, I guess. And I don't see anything happening significantly on the county level. So I think the council might need to instigate that. Supposedly there was a task force that the administration was putting together, and we haven't heard anything about it. We've made a request, our chair made a request to put a council member on there, and then the vice chair, County Rollins Fernandez, suggested that I be on it because I'm the only one on the council that's actually run a business and has that economic background to start to talk about how to diversify our economy. So that's one of the things that I think we're going to need to keep a close eye on, along with how this next $66 million that we're getting from the CARES Act is going to be spent. Because all the departments have put in their requests, and I've been told they equal over 70 million. So if they're doing that much stuff for the pandemic, because all this money has to be spent related to the pandemic, kind of begs the question, what else are they doing then if they need that much money just to cover extra expenses for responding to the pandemic? So there's sort of a fine line between telling the administration what to do and creating policy to drive things to go a certain way that's better for the county. And I think that's one of the things that I'm bringing to the table is, looking at the big picture issues and focusing on things like the injection well settlement agreement that affected the Clean Water Act across the country, like the county manager issue, like even this year we went through the budget with a fine-tooth comb, getting enough in there that was actually investment into our future economy, into agriculture, into climate action, things like that. It was a slow, painful process, but I think we ended up with a budget that actually has some forward-thinking vision in it.
I appreciate that. I have kind of two questions, and I've probably got a couple of minutes for it. One is there's a buzz about a Department of Agriculture for Maui County, and I'd like to speak to that. The second thing is the Mayor Victorino has wasted incalculable resources with the pursuit of a failed Supreme Court decision. I think it was something like $14 million. And if you take that into real local money, if that was injected into our local economy, you're probably looking at closer to $20-25 million of actual funds that, as far as their local value. And I'd like for you to speak to what would you have done if you actually had that 15 to $20 million to work with immediately in this pandemic response, what you would do with it. And the second thing was the first thing I've spoken about.
Okay, I think that's closer to 4 million. If you're talking about the money that we spent on the special counsel, it was 4.2 million. So I'm not sure if there is extra money that you've seen quoted somewhere as far as using our resources with our corp counsel on top of that. But there was a $14,000 expense for him to go with his entourage to DC. So you may have seen that figure too. I would never have gone to special counsel. I would have sat down with the plaintiffs before they got to the lawsuit, because I think all of this could have been handled. We're right back to where we could have been before this whole lawsuit thing started, before we put the first $10,000 into special counsel. And that's where we should have started, was with that collaboration. I tried to do that in my first term. I tried to talk to the chair. The chair was not interested, said I didn't know what I was talking about because I wasn't around back then. So first of all, that money would have never been spent if I had been chair back then, because I would not have driven us in that direction. Second of all, if we had that 4 million back, I would add it to the pandemic response, as far as what we're doing with our wastewater, because there's a lot of stuff that's happening relative to people are not going to be able to afford to do things like replace their cesspools when they have to. There's a state mandate of when they have to do that. So that money could have been spent better putting into our wastewater system to recycle the water, totally bypass the injection wells. We don't need those anymore, and work with the people who care about our clean water instead of working against them.
Well, it's my time, Paul. Time to pass on?
Yep, time to pass it on. And why don't we go to Bruce next, and then Sylvia and...
Yes. Hear me now? Good.
Yep, we can hear you.
So Kelly, congratulations on the county manager charter amendment. How are your feelings about a district voting charter amendment? And do you prefer the 3-and-3 method or the 9 different council seats method?
Well, I support district voting. I don't know that we'd be able to push both of those big ideas onto this ballot this year, because it's a lot of stuff for voters to wrap their heads around. But I would support it, and the reason why I landed on that 3 districts is because it's easy to do. It's not going to take a total rearrangement and a recount of every district. The one man, one vote means that we have to be divided. If we did it in 9 districts, we'd have to be divided into 9 equal districts with the same number of voters in each district. And that will have to adjust when people move in and out of districts. So following along with the 3 districts that are already divided into senatorial districts would be easier to do, because when that gets recounted every 5 or 10 years or however often they do it, there's an automatic system that's going to do that. So anyway, that was why I landed on that, because I thought it was easier for people to wrap their heads around. You still would get to vote for 3 council members. So you would vote for the 3 that are in your district. And so you still have a pretty good influence. And then you don't get into that. It also would keep us probably from getting into that fighting for your own district and only your own district. It'd be a great compromise between what people like about the non-district voting is that supposedly everybody's supposed to care about the entire island because they get voted on by the entire island. But my experience in this last couple of years has been pretty much that there's still a lot of fighting for your district. I've actually been told by a couple of council members not to make comments about their districts because they know better than I do. And so it's really not following that having this vote across the entire county is making everybody open to, everyone, all the council members having equal says in every district.
Thank you. And our water distribution system for the EMI ditches, what are your feelings about using an eminent domain or collective bargaining for the county to take ownership of that and manage the water resources?
however we can do it, that's what needs to happen. We need to take control of those water resources ourselves. I think we could do it easier than eminent domain if we had an administration that wanted to do it. If we had a corp council that wasn't running our county, that was doing the bidding of our council and our mayor. But if it has to be that way, if that's the only way we can do it, I would support it.
And on that same vein, Corporation Council has proven to be, I don't know what adjective I'll use, but
Nothing could
not
be
in the
stronger.
best interests of the people. What can be done about the Corporation Council situation that we're all finding ourselves running up against?
Well, I just talked to Chris Salem today, who works in the mayor's office and has been tracking the deferred agreement issue for many, many years. And he's got some very damning evidence against our corp council, which he's put into a letter along with some quotes that he had recorded the mayor saying early on in the term. And so that may be the catalyst that he's asking for her resignation. Other than that, I think she's done enough. I think the head of our corp council has done enough infractive actions that she could probably be impeached. There's actually an avenue in the charter and it takes a lot less signatures than for a ballot initiative to get somebody to court. But it has to go to court, and then the court would have to uphold the infractions that you put into the petition. I actually filed an ODC complaint against Moana Ludi back when I was dealing with the settlement agreement, because some amazing things that she did. I mean, I would have conversations with our attorneys in Office of Council Services, and we're all just shaking our heads, just wondering how someone of this caliber that's holding this position could behave the way she's behaving. So I think there's another council member who also filed an ODC complaint. So those supposedly take 4 or 5 months. So I don't know if we're going to hear back from it, but hopefully this year sometime. So whatever efforts are made to remove our corp council, I would be behind, because I think in the beginning, Kiani and I were the only two that voted against her. I don't think we should ever have a litigator as the head of corp council. Litigators are about winning and losing. They're not about serving the public or collaborating. So that's what we're getting. We have a corp council that only cares about winning and losing.
I have a quick question. Do you feel that the county manager position would help to alleviate this kind of problem in the future?
It will help, but because the county manager will not be the appointee of corp council, it really is, we have a strong system right now where the council can make those decisions. We did not have, we didn't have a good understanding from other council members of who this person was or why she should not be appointed. So that maybe a bigger lobby had to happen when Pat Wong resigned and she was put in, because we didn't gain anything when Pat Wong resigned. The person they put in his place was just as bad, in my opinion.
Well, thank you for that candid answer. And with that, I'll pass it on to the next person.
Okay, Sylvia, why don't you go next, and then Daniel?
Aloha, Kelly. Thank you so much for coming. You mentioned that we really need an economic plan for recovery, and that as a person with business experience, you would recommend that we invest in things like agriculture and climate action. I'd like to hear more about that. And also, you're on the committee on climate change. And how is that going, and what kinds of issues are you addressing there?
Well, I think it's been really helpful. I created a citizens lobby group that's sort of an advisory to this council committee, because it's so new, and I know that a lot of the other council members, it's not their top priority. They're on the committee, but I haven't gotten a lot of support on the committee. So one of the things that the citizens advisory group helped with was the items we got into the budget getting them to come out and testify, having a discussion about them, helping me prioritize them, and then coming out and testifying. We got things like the commitment to use open space funds to purchase Ma'alai and Mauka and support the Pohokea watershed that's across the street from the Ocean Center. That whole area, we're in negotiations as soon as we start the next budget. We got an erosion plan, a study funded for the whole Ma'alai coast area. We got things like the wetland project to start restoration of wetlands in Kihei. We got the Maui Nui Marine Resource Council funded, which was the mayor had taken out of funding. So we got a lot of those kinds of things put in there, and a lot of it came. And I don't think I would have gotten all of that without the strength of the people behind the Climate Action Committee. So that really helped a lot. Going forward, we're looking for what actions we can do to support a plan. Now that the mayor has an Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resilience in the mayor's office. I've already had them at one of my meetings. And so going forward, we're going to work with them, with our committee, to build a plan for climate, not just climate mitigation, but preparation and response for some of the climate disasters that we're going to be facing. And as far as what we need to do going forward for our economy is we really need to diversify and put a lot more emphasis on, we can kill two birds with one stone with regenerative agriculture, because that's one of the top responses for climate action. And then also if we grow our farming community and we add on and we invest in processes, agriculture processing, food hubs, we can expand the value proposition, because right now farmers will grow things and sell them to somebody at a very low profit margin, and then the person who takes that and processes it into a high value product gets the money, really. So we need to shift that around, put more of that expertise and education and the level of the farmers, so that they can actually enjoy some of that profit, that extra profit. So that's one area. I think tech is another area. Renewable energy is another area. But we need to start investing in things that are going to give our people jobs, family wage earning jobs. Because most of the tourist jobs are like $12 an hour, working on a boat, or parking cars or whatever. But we need to look at the pieces of our economy that are missing. When I was on the High Tech Development Corporation board for the state, which was appointed by the governor, one of the programs we had there was called 80/80, and it's a push to by the year 2030 we want to have 80,000 jobs in the state that are paying $80,000 or more. And that's still not considered top end for Hawaii. So but it's a lot better than what we're at right now, where a lot of people are making 30,000 or less.
Thank you for that answer. That's a lot of detailed policies that you have a lot of knowledge about. One thing you mentioned briefly was an erosion plan. What does that entail?
Well, studying what's happening with erosion along the Bay Area of Ma'alaya. We have a lot of those condos there, and they're going to be in the same situation that the Kahana 9 are in, where erosion is going to start happening, and we're trying to get ahead of it so that they can decide how much they want to invest in saving those condos and buildings that are closest to the ocean. Because we made it pretty clear to the Kahana folks, that the county's not interested in saving private property with our taxpayer money. So, but we can help with these erosion studies, because it's not just the condos, but there's also businesses there, and there's there's also we need to know how much do we want to invest in continuing to shore up infrastructure. If we know erosion is coming at a fast rate, maybe we want to just back off and do managed retreat instead of trying to fix the beaches and do beach restoration and continuing to repave the roads and fix the water pipes. So if we know that erosion is coming, it's time to back off and stop investing in any kind of construction in the sea level rise inundation zone.
Yeah, that's it's a sad reality, but I've heard that seawalls actually worsen the problem because they don't break the waves and they cause damage to the corals and things like that. But thank you so much for your answer, and I'll pass you on to the next interviewer.
Aloha, Kelly. Aloha. Thanks.
Daniel. Hi, Daniel.
Daniel, thank you so much for coming on, Kelly. I'm going to start off with this one
Sure.
question. As a public representative, it is a duty to face the truth and act righteously. These islands reflect the lowest voter turnout in the United States. On May 15th, 2019, Dr. David Kianusai gave a presentation to the Maui County Council, evidencing the illegal overthrow of Queen Liliuokalani in 1893 and showing clear violation of domestic and international law with the ongoing illegal United States military occupation of the Kingdom of the Hawaiian Islands. As a candidate for public representation, how do you rectify handling the truth of Dr. Sai's presentation, as well as the works of the Ko Hawaii Pai'aina office in Hilo, Keamokukapu, Henry Noah, Amelia Agora, Pompikanahele, Leon Su, Dr. Josias, Madame Ruth Bolome, etc.? How do you rectify the compliance of the law and restoration of occupied lands?
Well, I know that Keamoku won his lawsuit. I think it was like a 7-year lawsuit. So he's got his rights to his land. So I fully support that. I did actually have a conversation with Dr. Sai after that presentation, and I did an interview with one of his, I don't know if it was a PR person that's been following him around, filming things, but one of the things that came up was the council that he's involved in. He went back to his council and actually got the County Council of Maui sanctioned. So they recognized the Maui County Council as a legal body. So that was a kind of a step forward because we don't have to wonder if everything we're doing is respected by that group. You know, so their focus, as far as I know right now, is on the state of Hawaii and the infractions that they feel are happening at the state level, which I don't really, because I'm not a state legislator, I can't speak to being able to make any votes in that area, but I do support the rights. And I think one of the things that really impressed me about Dr. Sai's presentation was it was focused on the law. It wasn't focused on emotion or the idea that there were grandfather rights. It was really focused on legal, and I think he's got really good points. So I do support what he's fighting for, and I think that he's come a long way. In talking to people about his presentation, I did come up against people who remembered him from early days before he had his PhD and his legal status that he has now, and that he had advised some people not to pay their mortgages who are still suffering from that. So I think there's a mixed bag there with some of the history, but as I didn't know, I wasn't around in looking at those issues back then, so I can't speak to it personally. I just know what people have told me, and I had great respect for the way he presented himself and the presentation he gave to us.
Great. Mahalo, Kelly. And I'll pass it on to the next, and I'll come back.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly, for being here. And I have a question again about utilities. Bruce started off by one question about water and water rights. My other question is about our electricity rates. And since Maui residents pay the highest rate in the nation based on electric being provided by a private corporation, MECO, and Kauai pays the lowest rates in the nation on electric being provided by a community cooperative. What are your thoughts about supporting efforts to changing our electric distribution system from a private corporation to a publicly owned and operated cooperative?
I support it. There was an effort a few years ago when the Maui Energy Conference first started up to look at that. And I think we brought somebody over from Colorado who was working on a municipal utility and turning it into a publicly owned utility. So I think that needs to be followed up on. I don't know what happened to that other than the fact that in my opinion, to be really frank, and just between us 6 people, is the competency did not exist in our administration. That even if we had been able to be successful in pushing that forward, we need the competency at our administrative level to deal with that, to collaborate with the people that are running the. I mean, I was actually floored that our mayor back then thought he could run a utility when he couldn't even run the town dump. I mean, at the same time that he was trying to give away the authority to manage our landfill, he was saying we should take over our electric utility. I do think we should. I don't think we should run it ourselves as a county. I think what Kauai is doing is great because they have a co-op, but they have professional people running the actual utility, and then anything that's left over at the end of the year goes back to the ratepayers. I love that model, and I think one of the reasons that that the Hawaii Electric Company went to rebranding all of their Maui, Big Island, and Oahu under one name is because they're trying to make it more difficult for us to segment Maui off. So, I think it can be done. I do, but it's going to take the right people with the right motives to do it. It can't be done out of a desire just to own it and run it. It has to be done out of a desire to bring it to the people, to truly make it publicly owned.
That's great. Thank you for that. And certainly Kauai is a good model, a good example. And there are many other communities that have taken this on also in California and have done so very remarkably well. So
if anybody's going to do it, I think it has to be somebody with, and I don't want to sound like I'm, trying to put myself there, but someone with my background that has worked with the utilities, that has relationships all the way up to Connie Lau at the top, because it's going to take some front work of going in and paving the way for that to happen and explaining why that needs to happen and making them get on our side. So we don't, right now, I don't think our administration has that relationship with the utility, but I think it's doable.
Thank you for that. Another question I have is about the functioning of the county council. It seems like when we look at a lot of the votes, especially key votes that are happening, around, the injection well or Wailuku or decisions about the managers, all these different pieces of voting, it seems like there's a group that votes in one way, and then there's a group that votes the other way. And there's this divide. What do you see the impact of this divide? Is this something that can be bridged with the present administration? And what is the need to really get Ohana candidates or progressive candidates who really have maybe a different focus in?
Well, there's a great need because one of them, as you know, that we thought was progressive turned out not to be so progressive. So, there's a need to, if nothing else, obviously we need to replace that person and get someone who's going to vote the way they say they were going to vote. But, you can't, if it doesn't happen, or if there's at least not a good attempt to replace that person, the message that's being sent is, you don't have to tell us the truth. That's why it's really important to make sure that people get replaced when they don't tell the truth during their whole the whole candidate cycle. I've heard this person say on the floor, get really offended when people have come up and testified about it and said, you don't know me, you have no right to say that. And I actually said to her one time that's the reason why people are coming up and saying that is because they thought they knew you. That's what all these forums are about, so people can get to know you and know what you stand for. And when you say one thing and then you vote another way, of course people are angry, and they have the right to express that, in a nonviolent way when they come to testify. So I think it's imperative that the attempts are made. I think we have a good chance but to tell you the truth, I think there was a little bit of sloppiness in the previous election because there was just this mad rush to get anybody to run for these offices, and some of them weren't vetted and they weren't being held to what they said they were going to do.
So I agree with that, Kelly, and certainly we are looking to our past experience and learning from that, and looking at how to develop things so that we can vet candidates much more thoroughly. So, but I look at the repercussions of these decisions, and they're very significant, especially when it's the balance between a more progressive agenda and something totally different. So,
No, it's important. I don't think the administration has a lot to do with it as far as what the council's doing, but I mean, we made a little bit of headway getting the professional county manager issue on the ballot because, we got 6 votes. That was pretty close to a miracle to get Alice Lee's vote on that. So there is a little wiggle room on certain issues, where we stand right now, but definitely would like to have it change back to where we thought we were going to have a majority.
Great. Thank you for that. Bruce, why don't you go next, and then we'll have Sean, and then Sylvia.
Yes, Kelly, the big question on people's breath right now is about recovery from the pandemic, alleged pandemic. What are your plans for how to bring this recovery for the people? We've lost so much with, one of the highest unemployment rates in the country because of our dependence on tourism. What is your plan for short-term and long-term recovery from what's happening, and what do you see is actually going to happen with our economy?
Well, I'm pretty focused on diversifying the economy, not going back to trying to get people to stop thinking about going back to the normal or the way it was. And I hear that. I hear people saying, well, when we get back to where the tourists are coming again, well, yeah, we're not going to ever have those numbers, I don't think. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think right now we have a great opportunity to look at other types of industries that we could have here. Manufacturing, I think, needs to happen here because all of our manufactured goods have to get shipped here. We don't make anything here ourselves. And that's one of the areas where I think we need to start looking at. Because the council cannot direct the administration, we really have to look at some strong policies. And the first plan to get back to, or to get to what they were calling the new normal, is mostly about process. Kiani actually wrote a plan about how to continue on with the work we're doing, incorporating some of the processes that we learned through like this, the Zoom type of meeting, where we're saving a lot of resources and expenses by not driving all over. But the substance of it is what needs to, if we don't see something happening, it's probably going to come down on us to create a task force. If we don't see that task force happening at the administrative level, and start talking about what types of industries we're going to support. And we need to start thinking in terms of where the taxpayer dollars make the most sense. Because there's been the last bastion, and Sean knows who that is, of user pays philosophy, which is, the bus should pay for itself. The parks should pay for themselves. And this propensity to want to have people pay to go swimming or play tennis or get on a bus the full amount. That's not, we have a reason why people pay taxes. And one of the reasons they pay taxes is to have parks to go to and to have these services and to have a bus, because even if we're not, riding on the bus ourselves, it's a benefit to all of us, because every person on that bus is a car that's not on the road. So we have to start thinking in terms of what benefits our community, even if the people that are using those services aren't paying 100%. And so one of the examples is EV chargers. We're going to have to supplement EV chargers, and I think that's a good use of taxpayer money, because it's never going to pay. It's not going to be a profitable business, and that's why Hitachi pulled out. But we want those to be owned locally, because when you swipe your card in an electric or a PV charger, it used to be every dollar went to Japan because Hitachi owned most of those chargers. We need those kinds of systems to be owned locally so that the money stays here, and that adds to our economy. And one of the things that we have to start looking at is cost benefits. So I learned this from being in the fuel business, is that our state doesn't look at the cost benefits of something like biodiesel, like what are the jobs it's bringing, how much of the, since 90 cents of every dollar is staying in the state, how does that compare with the fossil fuel industry where 90 cents of every dollar is leaving the state? And if you look at those, if we start doing studies on cost benefits for these types of things, we're going to find that we're actually saving money by spending money to help get these systems in place. The landfill is a perfect example. We've got a huge mess down there because we haven't spent the money where it should be spent. And so we could have a lot of processing and recycling going on there that's kind of come to a halt, and start looking at our waste as a resource instead of where do we put this? Look at it as a resource. There are people who will pay for the cardboard that's going in the crushed glass, the plastic. There's things you can do with the waste. So that's one area where I would start. I want to make that one of my focus areas in the next term, is getting recycling going again. So it's something we can be proud of again. We used to be really proud of our recycling on Maui, and it's diminished really sadly.
And briefly, our affordable housing situation, where people can sell their land that they've got in affordable housing, in a few years later and make a profit. How do we get at the into perpetuity aspect, and how do we solve our affordable housing thing that is a real solution?
I think we're close to that, because we haven't been approving any affordable housing projects that have been allowed to sell. Since I've been on this with this new council, they've been allowed to sell within 10 years. So I think that we need, like you said, Paul, we need to get those extra couple of progressives to lock that in. But we need to be looking at. I don't think everything has to be in perpetuity. I think some of them could be 30-year, 60-year agreements, because there is that thing about people, but there should be a formula in there for how much equity you can pull out of your house if you're going to sell it in 30 years. And I actually have, a personal experience with that, because the house I'm living in, which we've been in for 34 years, we got on a farmer home loan deal that was a federal affordable housing program, and because we added on in 3 years, which you weren't really allowed to do, we had to pay all the interest back that we got as part of this credit, which we did, and it served its purpose. We paid it back. That's the other side of things, is there needs to be if anybody is going to sell within 10 years, they need to pay back everything they got from the county. So that would be the other alternative to going 30 years or in perpetuity, is you pay it back with interest. You pay back, and then you consider it a wonderful loan at a time when you needed it. We're in our early 20s, needing a place to live, and we got this loan, and it even though we had to pay 13% interest to pay it all back, it was worth it.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. And with that, I'll pass it on to the next.
Aloha, Kelly. I mean, there must be something psychic going on here, because burning in the back of my mind was, we look out and we see 20,000 cars rusting away, tens of millions of dollars worth of ancient technology, dinosaurs sitting by our airport as it spews kerosene. So as we look towards a different future, the ability to have an electric infrastructure here is vitally important. And how do you see us doing that in a minute or so? How do you see us? Give us a little bit of your vision of what you could see if as this thing rolls out. What type of Maui could you see with the potential that we have, with the technology that we have today, regarding electric stations, how that would help our economy, and how it helps as far as self-sufficiency is concerned?
Yeah, I think it definitely would help our economy if we own them locally, whether it's the county that owns them or if we have them locally owned by a local business. It's going to take a bigger investment by the county than what they've got now. I think right now in this budget they have $300,000, and they're going to put out an RFP. That's not going to cover more than a handful of TV chargers, and I don't even know for how long. But what we need to do is put a plan together for a network I mean, we just need an island-wide network. There are enough electric vehicles on the island now that if we put the network in place, it would get used and it would encourage more, more electric vehicles. But the way it's piecemeal together right now, I'm hearing from a lot of people who drive up to get charged and then it doesn't work. So we have four firm PV chargers on the island that Maui Electric has taken over. And other than that, it's up to the whoever owns the parking lots to make sure that they work. And it doesn't really behoove them because they're not making any money off of it. So it has to be a bigger plan, but I think it needs to be an island-wide plan. I've been on Molokai and they don't really want electric vehicles over there because they don't see a personal benefit. But I think starting island-wide where everything's tied in together makes a lot of sense. And I think we have to be prepared to put a couple million into it. And if we have to do the same thing, I mean, we could treat it like an electric utility. We could treat it like a co-op. We could create a co-op around it. We could treat it as an extension of the electric utility because the electric utility is, the one that's feeding most of these. But the two things that bother me the most about where we're at right now is one, is not locally owned, and two, most of the chargers are run by fossil fuel. So if they're plugged into the utility, they're still on fossil fuel, and you're not really on renewable energy. So the first thing I guess would be to take an inventory of which ones, are there any charges, which ones are actually PV, being fed by the solar panels, which, like the college, the one at UHMC, they're underneath the canopy of all those solar panels. So that would be, I think we could build a plan. I don't think it's going to be cheap, but I think it's worth it. And I think part of what will sell the plan to the public is looking at the cost benefits.
So now what you're talking about, diversity and flexibility. We are an insular place here. We only have, but we also have extraordinarily talented people. So that flexibility of infrastructure this is what I'm kind of hearing you say, is that our ability to have a flexibility of infrastructure based on what's going on, whether it's a storm happening or rising tides or a cutoff of materials coming in from other places, or the need to take raw materials that are coming from here or other places. That extraordinary internal flexibility, that's what's going to take time to be able to put together. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Well, the plan needs to encompass things so we don't have unintended consequences, like we can't afford to pave our roads now because we have no road tax, right? So we have to figure out how to build that in. And we're at a level now where there's enough, at the beginning of electric vehicles, we didn't want to do any of that because it was discouraging people. But now there's something, the last 2 years ago, there was something like 4,000 electric vehicles on the island, and I'm not sure how many hybrids, but as the number grows and the interest in it grows and people are starting to understand more what it means to own an electric vehicle, I think now the time is right to start making that plan for an island-wide system.
Do you believe that right now, if you drive a hybrid system, you drive a hybrid car, there's a $50 penalty, and an electric car, there's a $100 penalty on registration. And could you speak to that? And the second thing, we have about a minute. The second thing is, could you speak about your thoughts about having a local Department of Agriculture, a Maui County Department of Agriculture?
Yeah, when the fee first came down was in the previous term, and I think it was proposed by Ricky Hokama, who was chairing the budget committee at the time. So originally I opposed it because it was double. It was $100 and for the hybrids and $200, I think, for the electric vehicles. I was able to get that cut in half so that now it's $100 for electric and then $50 for the hybrids. But I was fully expecting to be able to undo that in this term, but for some reason we didn't even have that support from our progressives, so that, I think that needs to be a campaign issue. Do you feel like, there obviously is going to be a need in the future for people for everybody who's, whether you're driving on biofuels or electricity or hydrogen or whatever they come up with, to pay something towards the road maintenance and the upkeep. But we're still at a point where we're having massive damage from fossil fuels, and we should be taxing the problem, not the solution. So I'm hoping that maybe after this next election, we can get those fees taken off and really focus, because every penny, I mean, the amount of what we're getting off those fees is so little. And for every penny that we tax petroleum, we bring in over $700,000.
Wow.
So, and people don't even know a penny, or maybe that was even half a penny. I can't remember what I was looking at last year, but the fossil fuel right now, the fossil fuel price is so low. I mean, if I had a way to garner the intent of the progressives, and if we had a majority, I would try to convince people right now is the time we should be putting a 10-cent tax on fossil fuel.
Right.
Because the prices are so low, no one even noticed it anyway. I mean, we should be taxing fossil fuel when they drop the prices down. I mean, right? There was a week when the petroleum industry is trading at negative $40 a share.
Right. Right.
Because of the trouble they're in. So this is a point where when it's under $2 a gallon, where we should be taxing them. They're the problem. They should be paying for the roads, and we should be shoring up the renewables at this point. So my feeling about that tax is that, it's pretty minimal, because I haven't really had that many complaints from the people. And I think one of the reasons why it's been allowed to stand is I think some of the council members see it as a rich person's tax. They see a lot of higher income people driving electric vehicles.
Right.
And so I think they think it's justified that way.
Okay, our time is up. I had really wanted you to try to get to a Department of Agriculture, a county Department of Agriculture. Perhaps somebody will take that in the next few questions. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Yes, thanks, Kelly. I'll take you up on that, Sean. I'll ask that question about the Department of Agriculture. How do you see that going forward?
I support it. It's not in the, I think it'll take a charter amendment to create a department, but I definitely support it. If we want agriculture to be a major industry on this island and part of our economic diversity, we have to not only make a separate department, but we have to put an agricultural expert at the head of it. Because when you talk to our ag coordinator right now, I mean, super nice guy. And he'll go down there and help set up the Ag Fest, and he's a hands-on guy, but he'll admit to you that he doesn't know anything about farming or agriculture. So why is he our agriculture specialist? So anyway, that's along with that, we need a mayor who's going to put those people with the expertise into the director positions. So that's one of the things that we haven't had in the last 3 mayors. But yeah, I definitely support having a Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Kelly. Another question I had is, how do you feel about council members taking campaign contributions from large corporations off the island? And some counties on the mainland have passed ordinances stating that corporations outside of their county cannot donate money to the county council and to the mayoral candidates for office. Do you think that is something that you would work to pass, or that is possible here in the county of Maui?
Well, every time I've looked at those kinds of issues, I've been told by the Campaign Spending Commission that would be a state issue, that has to be passed by the state legislature. So I don't think it's possible for us to do those limitations. I think the best that we can do is find out who they are and make sure people know, who's taking those donations. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if you take those donations that you're going to be voting a certain way. I mean, I was on the council when I think it was Jason Eno came and talked about that, the council members, and he said, some of you are my friends, but some of you have taken maximum donations from A and B, which, I never got any money from them, but one of the council members who was a big agriculture advocate, got really upset, pounded his fist, yelled at poor Jason. And, that wasn't the intent. So part of what we have to do is hold them accountable by making it public. But we also have to elect people who are mature enough to understand, to be able to take criticism and understand that, okay, these are the concerns of the public. They have a right to be concerned. So we don't necessarily have a full slate of people on the council right now who can do that. So that's part of the job of the electorate is, to make sure that we're putting people on who have thick skins, who respect testimony and the public opinion. So, but I think that the way to do that is to, publish something and make it public who's taking money from outside corporations.
Thank you, Kelly. I think that is one thing that we will strive to do in this election season is to make public where donations are coming from each candidate, and we will have that kind of information available. We're getting towards the end. One other campaign issue we haven't brought up yet, I think, is the drug problem. There's a crisis with illegal drugs such as ice. Do you have any perspective on that issue?
Oh, well, other than being involved with nonprofit organizations that are trying to help families like Hui Malama, I was on the board of Hui Malama for about 10 years. So we dealt with families that had a lot of drug issues. And then I've been involved with some of the homeless issues where there's drug issues. I do think we need to invest more in mental health and drug rehab in this county. It hasn't really been an issue. It hasn't come up a lot. And when I talk to people about mental health issues, which sometimes get confused with drug issues, but sometimes it's the same thing. It's the same person that has both. I'm constantly hearing there aren't enough resources in this county. So I think that's one area that we have to invest more money in for sure. There are some private efforts right now. Genesis and Sulara are putting together a facility for youngsters with those kinds of issues because we don't have enough beds in our current facilities. So there are some people doing some private efforts, but we need to step up as a county and invest more.
Thank you, Kelly. I'll pass you along to the next person.
Kelly, I just want to follow up what Sylvia was talking about in terms of also the homelessness population. What can we do? I mean, I look at some of the ordinance on a state level that's been passed, and they're increasing fines for people who are homeless. But as a community, what can we do to people who all of a sudden are left without shelter?
Well, we need to expand our resources. And one of the first things I learned when I got on the council is that we have very little resources in South Maui. So that was one of the first things I started working on. We now have a mobile hygiene unit, which will be deployed in June when they get the second unit that's actually it's ADA compliant. So there was a big snafu with the ADA compliance. And we're also still looking at a tiny home project for homeless people. Affordable housing, affordable rentals are one of the ways we're going to alleviate these problems. The Kaiwahine Village that just opened up in April, they started filling those units. And I'm not sure where they're at now. They were about 25% full last time I talked to them, and then they had more people moving in. But I did talk to the housing department about that project with the Homeless Alliance people, whether they were able to place people who were homeless, and they said they did. They placed quite a few people in that affordable housing. That affordable housing complex has 118 units, and it's for people who are at 60% of the area median income and below. So, you could be making $25,000 a year and you can get in a two-bedroom apartment for $511. And so the affordable rentals are going to be really important. We have another project going in with that same developer up in Lahaina. And I've been working with him on another project in Kihei. So there's going to be one that's going to be afforded in the Affordable Housing Fund that's off the POA up behind the golf course. But that's one of the things, finding people who are dedicated to, they used to say no one's standing in line to build these affordable projects. And I don't think that's true. There's a lot of people out there who want to do the right thing if they can find the right support. And when I found Doug Bigley, who's the one that's doing these affordable rentals, who knows how to get, he knows where under every nook and cranny, state, federal, and county, how to get these funded. And he's dedicated to that genre of people, that income level that's 60% and below. And that's, squarely where we're going to be housing more homeless people out of, because a lot of the homeless people aren't jobless. They're just making really, really low incomes and they can't afford the rents that are around here. So that's one area. The resources, another area, the mobile hygiene unit. I'm really excited to get that deployed because in that unit, we're going to have counseling and building those relationships with homeless people, or how we get them placed in help, whether it's drug rehab or mental health or job assistance. There has to be a level of trust to be able to transition them to, to another program, to be able to refer them to other programs. And you can't build that level of trust just walking around pulling people out of bushes. It has to be over the course of a month or 2 or 3, people coming out, developing that relationship with the same 2 people who are hired to run this unit. And that's
so yeah, Kelly, you're referring in many ways to a continuum of care, where you start with people who are on the streets or in addiction or some type of mental illness issues, and working with them and supporting them in this whole process so that they can get to a place where they are stable and being taken care of in some way, shape, or form, but at least our community is working with them in that continuum. Is this the type of thing that you'd like to see for our community? Because it works well.
It's that, but it's also the reverse of that, which the Housing First program works well on some people who are mentally ill or have drug problems. Is first you get them into 4 walls. That's the Housing First philosophy, is getting them into a secure apartment or room somewhere where they feel safe. They realize what it's like to be in a home where they don't have to push all their belongings around with them everywhere they go, and they can get some services. But so there's both philosophies, and you have to know who you're dealing with and understand the actual cause of the homelessness in order to figure out what's going to work best. And I do think there are people that have a handle on that. I hired Lisa Darcy in my office for the remainder of the year because she's out there on the ground level. I don't know if you know Lisa, but she used to be with the Homeless Alliance. She departed from them because she didn't see enough action. But she helped create the rapid response team to the COVID-19 that's focusing on homeless needs. And she's somebody who is actually periodically, she'll go out and she'll live among the homeless for a week or 2 so she can build those relationships. So she's put herself on the line. She's struggling herself. Her car was broken down. And so anyway, I hired her for the remainder of this year so she could do some work for me, making recommendations on what we should ask for out of this COVID money for the homeless situation, and also building the relationships where I can utilize some of my office funds to get supplies and things to some of these homeless people.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that, Kelly, that action's being taken and that you have that type of kind of reaching out in the community and connecting in that way. Daniel, you have our last question, and then if there's anyone else who has a very brief question, we can ask that, but we are reaching close to our hour right now.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Kelly, now this is going to be how many terms have you been in office thus far?
Coming up will be my 3rd.
Okay, coming up a 3rd. So, and I recall in the past that you had a number of years in the Department of Education.
I was on the State Board of Education. I did not work in the department, so I was on a policymaking board there. And that was a board of 13 people statewide. So I was, the representative from Maui is the only representative for Maui schools.
And how long were you on there for?
4 years.
For 4 years. Now, aside from the board of Hui Malama, which was the drug group that drug alleviation or however you might say that you were involved with. What other qualifications can you share with us from your experience?
For being a council member?
Right. Yeah. For
I have a lot of experience in the community as a volunteer, leading projects like the playground projects. I led the first, building the first super playground on the island, and I was really involved with the PTA back then. So I have a lot of experience with community organizing, with leading volunteer groups, with getting stuff done. I have to realize that I had to kind of take stock of my background being in business, because a lot of times I have to really tone myself down and find the patience to deal with this council and the slow way things happen. So, because I'm a results oriented person. I like to see things getting done, and it's really frustrating when something that should be a 5-minute discussion turns into a 3-hour, discussion. But other organizations, I've been in a lot of renewable energy organizations in the state, the Hawaii Renewable Energy Alliance and the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum at the state level, the High Tech Development Corporation, which is a state level board, and several nonprofits here that I was on the board of Akaku at one time. I've been on Kuimalama Learning Center, which was it wasn't really a drug rehab. It's an educational program and for at-risk kids. So we actually did the GED program, the GED graduates as well. I was involved in, of course, PTA and numerous school projects that involved the community of South Maui and Kula, because we moved up to Kula at one point for 4 years. And so then I was asked to lead the playground effort up there by Dick Mayer. I've been involved in the council and the administration through the Blue Ribbon. We had a Blue Ribbon committee that I was on. Dick Mayer put it together for the previous administration. And our job was to go out and find people for boards and commissions, to apply for boards and commissions. And we made a real concerted effort to try to balance out the boards and commissions, because they're generally crony central. And so we had this 2 years where we had this Blue Ribbon committee. It was 8 of us from the community trying to make sure that these boards and commissions were balanced out demographically, geographically, gender-wise. And it's like pulling teeth to get local people to apply. So we were out putting flyers in the grocery stores and the churches and everywhere to try to draw people out. But there's probably a lot of things I'm forgetting as well that are on a long list of. I was a Girl Scout leader for 4 years. That was if that doesn't teach you to deal with adults. The girls were great. Dealing with the moms was the challenge.
Children have a lot to teach adults, that's for sure. I always learn from the keiki. Well, mahalo for your community service and sharing. I know we're low on time, so I'm going to pass it. And thank you.
Well, again, thank you, Kelly. Bruce, you have one final question. This will be our last questions, and then we'll move on.
Yes, Kelly. Let's fantasize for a moment. If we get a majority of progressives on the council, what would be your top priorities and projects that you'd want to see the council work on and pass for the next 2 years?
Well, I think the top priority would be to work on professional descriptions for our directors, so that when the next mayor comes in, we have a better guidance system. I would want to see the council put together another temporary investigative group for tax reform, because one of the things that didn't make it into the last one that I specifically requested them work on was a tax credit for landlords who rent to residents. So we have a $20,000 fine for illegal short-term rentals. But if we had a carrot where we're saying that people, instead of doing an illegal short-term rental, rent it out to a resident at a reasonable rate, and we'll give you a tax credit. So that's one of the things I want to work on. I really want to work on getting recycling going again, because that's one area. The climate change plan is going to be key. I'm hoping that we learn from this pandemic that we have to invest the time and effort now for to stave off the next one, or at least be ready for it, and that we're not just going to drop the ball on climate change. So the money that went into the budget for some of the issues that I talked about earlier gives me great hope that there's still interest in that. But it's going to take the collective public getting behind it. So I think we have to really look at how we're going to get components into a plan that are going to show us where to build and where not to build, to make a statement about recycled water and doing away with the injection wells and saving our reefs, and also the watersheds. I mean, the mayor had cut all the watershed projects on the island by 20%, and our council was able to put that money back in there. So keeping focus on those kinds of projects is going to be key, and I think it's going to help if you guys put those into your questions as well. As what will you support these kinds of environmental issues going forward, and in the immediate future, not somewhere down the line if I get reelected again. But we have to start working on these issues now. We don't have a lot of time.
Thank you so much for those thoughtful answers.
And we'll work on the EMI system.
I'm glad to hear that, Kelly. And is there anything that you'd like to conclude in terms of talking to our viewers, and how can they get in touch with you or your website? And if they are so inclined, how could they donate some support for you?
Well, yeah, donations are great. Right now, I'm rebuilding. What happened in my first term was I had a Facebook page that I used for my candidacy, and then when I got elected, I turned it into it's Kelly King Maui County Council. So I've been using it as a council Facebook page and using it to disseminate information and post things that have to do with my initiatives on the council. So we're building a different Facebook page, so that should come out soon. But if people want to send, contact me through my my personal email, which is ktkmaui@me.com. I'm using that for now that's a direct email that comes to me. And if they want to send, we still have Friends of Kelly King. If they want to send a donation to my home address is 72 Kalola Place, Kihei, 96753, and that information will be coming out really soon too. So it's been a hard call to decide when to start campaigning with all this social distancing and everything. But I think now after the end of the filing period, people are going to start coming out with signs and things.